I'm joined by Josh Dougherty, who's a senior analyst and researcher at Iraq Body Count. Hi, Josh. How are you doing? Thanks for joining.
Good. Thanks, Richard.
At Iraq Body Count, you uncovered almost 15,000 additional casualties in the Iraq War. Isn't that akin to uncovering a mass grave in many ways?
Well, yeah, but it's actually quite a bit bigger than that, I would say. Usually with mass graves, they found a number in Iraq during the war, but it was usually dozens, hundreds. So 15,000 would be, like hundreds of mass graves. During the war, occasionally there would be mass graves found, and often there were dozens in a grave, sometimes hundreds. I think one of the biggest was probably at the beginning of the ISIS, war, where they killed hundreds of Iraqi soldiers and at a site, I think, near Tikrit. And, that was probably the biggest sort of mass grave in the war. So nowhere near 15,000. So to have that sort of revealed at one time in a collection of hundreds of thousands of documents is really huge, and much bigger than any mass grave they even found during the war.
That's extremely harrowing. I want to ask you how these disclosures and the cables that you worked on with WikiLeaks, how did they affect the perception of the Iraq War in the public eye, in the public sphere, and also personally for you?
Well, I think as far as the public, I think that it turned sentiment away from the war in terms of against the war, but I think that was already happening to quite a large extent by 2010. Sentiment against the war had turned quite a bit. So remember, at the beginning of the war, public opinion in the United States, at least, was actually majority supportive. And then over the years, as it got worse and worse into 2004, 5, 6, 7, sentiment turned away. And then I think that the war logs kind of just solidified that again, as the war was drawing down at that point.
And for you personally?
Well, I don't think it changed my opinions about anything personally, because doing the work that I've been doing for those years, I already kind of pretty much knew what was going on there, and it did reveal a number of new things, but it was pretty much in line with what I already knew what was going on.
During the past decade, we've heard oftentimes that WikiLeaks work method and work ethic being described as callous and reckless, and that the publication of these cables was reckless. How would you personally describe the operational security that was being used by media partners with WikiLeaks and the redaction process itself?
Well, I think at that time I'd spent about 2 months in London with all these other groups working on the documents, and the idea that it was that WikiLeaks or the other partners were callous about it is ridiculous. It's not true at all. It was actually a very big issue. It was one of the reasons why the release of the documents was originally scheduled for September, and it was pushed back to October, mainly around the redaction issue. So I think they were taking it very seriously, and from what I remember of the whole redaction issue, I wasn't involved in the Afghanistan releases, but from what I've heard about that and what people were saying about that, the WikiLeaks didn't really have a global redaction system for hundreds of thousands of documents, and none of the media partners had that either, as far as I know. And they wound up having to withhold thousands of documents from the release, and they didn't want to have to do that again. So, they had to come up with a redaction system, and all the partners were working on that very hard. And some of my colleagues wound up coming up with an idea that wound up working to get it done. And Another thing I might mention on that is that I watched your coverage of the trial and a number of others, and the prosecution at one point, when questioning, my colleague John, was talking about, asserting that there were some names that were left unredacted, even though we had, used this major redaction system. I don't know whether that's true or not. Sometimes things, facts have been mixed up about that. And, but the point is that there is really no redaction system that you can guarantee is going to be perfect. Because, even if you hired an army of people to go through 400,000 documents, there's going to be human error. There's going to be mistakes made. And I've worked with other U.S. government documents that were released by the U.S. government through Freedom of Information requests and things like that. And there are redaction mistakes in their own redacted documents. WikiLeaks was taking the issue very seriously. The other media partners were taking the issue very seriously, from my observation. All right, now my main work was in analyzing and extracting information about Iraqi casualties, not about the redaction stuff. But from what I observed during those 2 months, it was a major issue for all the partners, and they were all taking it very seriously.
It seems that exposing war crimes gets people in more trouble than actually committing war crimes. During the entire Assange hearing, we never heard the names George Bush or Donald Rumsfeld mentioned even once. How do you personally feel, having worked on all these documents and seen all of these deaths, that no one has been prosecuted for them or held accountable at all?
Yeah, that's a glaring inconsistency about the trial and about the Chelsea Manning trial before it. That in both cases, the U.S. government was trying to put these people away for 100+ years, and nobody from the Bush administration was ever prosecuted for anything having to do with the Iraq War. People involved in the Abu Ghraib scandals, Haditha, and all these things never got, they never got sentences anywhere near what they were trying to impose on Chelsea Manning, on Julian Assange. And, there's a glaring inconsistency with that. It's that, it is definitely that, committing war crimes and atrocities is somehow much less important than exposing them to the public without the government's permission. And, that's just seems to be the way it is.
Josh, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for all your brave work and your colleagues' brave work at Iraq Body Count. I'm really grateful.
I like your show,
time. Thank you. That's a huge honor. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good day.
Take care.